Hello and welcome to this Vavstuga video about the Julia Drawloom from Glamokra and Karen Myrehed. We think this small but mighty loom is a game changer for folks seeking to add figurative damask and other complex patterning techniques to their weaving practice. If you already have a Julia Drawloom, we hope this video will help get you up and running. If you're thinking about buying a Julia Drawloom, we hope this video will provide enough information to help you make your decision. Our goal is to show you how to make the most of this awesome loom. Today, we're going to assemble the Drawloom and dress it to the point that you see here. Then, we're going to load it into my car and drive it up to the Vavstuga farmhouse so Becky can work her magic and demonstrate how to weave the project that Karen has designed and included with the instructions. We've got a lot to do, so let's get started. We'll begin with an overview of the loom. At the heart of the Drawloom is the Julia frame with its horizontal countermarch and capacity for up to 8 shafts and 8 treadles. It has a weaving width of 27 inches and a depth of about 32 inches, a perfect solution for studios where space is at a premium. For a pattern-shaft Drawloom, however, more length is required, so we add an extension to the back of the loom, which moves the warp and back beams further away from the business end and allows room for the pattern shafts. With the extension, the Julia measures about 71 inches from front to back, still a great space saver in comparison with other Drawlooms. The Drawloom attachment sits on top of the countermarch and extension with the console behind the beater. There are pulls for 20 pattern shafts, which is a lot, as we shall see. The pattern shafts will sit in the space behind the ground shafts here. They will be hung from these cords attached to the pulls on the console. We will deploy them several steps down the road. Now, let's build a Drawloom. Maybe you have already been weaving on your Julia as a conventional countermarch loom. If not, and you would like more information about assembling the base loom, please see Becky's Julia video, which is available on Vimeo free of charge if the loom has been purchased from Vävstuga. If you've already been enjoying your Julia, you'll need to make a few changes before you can add the extension. A gable needs to be loosened so that the back beam can be taken out. The warp beam must be removed, as well as the ratchet and pawl, which will be remounted at the back of the loom down the road. Finally, remove the 2 bolts that secure the countermarch support to the back of the loom. When all that is done, we are ready to assemble the extension. We're going to build the right side of the extension first, that is, the right side from our position as we sit to weave. We will need these parts. There are 2 of each, but we'll start with these. Here we see the horizontal bar that runs just above the floor, the horizontal bar that runs across the top of the loom, the rear upright, and the bolster, which we'll put aside for now. Start by laying out the rear upright and the top horizontal bar. The upright should be placed so that the row of holes for the bolster lies in the top half, the support, and towards the outside. The pieces are attached at the upper corner with 2 wooden dowels, a barrel nut, and a 100 mm bolt. Lay the completed section of the extension across the top of the base loom, right up against the beater cradle. Secure it using a barrel nut and one of the specially capped 150 mm bolts. Take up the original back beam which we removed from the Julia earlier. We're going to secure it to the bottom of the upright with its original hardware. We can let it hang in midair for now. We'll repeat the process on the other side of the loom. We must now address the horizontal bars at the base of the loom. First, attach the piece to the rear leg of the extension using one of the capped nuts and bolts. Then, clamp the other end to the loom frame where it naturally falls. Using the pre-existing hole in the extension as a guide, drill through the base loom underneath. Attach the pieces with another one of the capped nuts and bolts. Repeat on the other side of the loom. Time to mount the bolsters. Right one first. Line it up with the holes on the extension and attach it with 100mm bolts. On the bolster, you can see the opening for the warp beam and the little hole where the pawl will be screwed in. Attach it like so, being sure to secure it with the second bolt at the bottom. Repeat on the other side. Now, the back beam. It rests on 70mm bolts inserted through the bolster and can be adjusted up or down as required. More on that later. For now, we'll use the middle holes. We attach the pawl to the bolster with its bolt, washer, and locking nut and insert the warp beam. The beam should turn pretty easily and the pawl should be loose enough to make a satisfying click. Our loom's extension is now complete and we are ready to build the Drawloom attachment. The Drawloom attachment is a freestanding unit that sits on top of the countermarch and extension. We'll build the console first. Collect these pieces and lay them out so. Notice that the right hand upright here is longer than the one on the left. The uprights should be parallel to one another and will hang perpendicular to the floor. The bar for the pull handles is bolted to the uprights in the holes provided. It is attached both sides with a bolt and locking nut. The hook bar at the bottom is adjustable. Start with it at its lowest position. The flat side of the bar should face the floor. Attach it with bolts and wing nuts so it can be easily moved if necessary later on. The upper crossbar is positioned so the holes for the pull cords are at the top. It is mounted with the threaded bolts behind the uprights. It will slant upwards from left to right. When the console has been put together, we move on to its supports. Lay the three pieces out like so. The rear crossbar has notches so that it will fit snugly inside the extension. The side supports are attached on top through the second of the two holes on each side. Use washers and large threaded bolts. The holes at the other ends of the long support bars are for the bolts and locking nuts that will attach the console. Like this. When the attachment is assembled, it can be placed on top of the loom. The console should be pushed back to the rear of the beater cradle so that it hangs just in front of the countermarch. The rear should lie flat and neat across the extension. 60mm screws are provided to secure the Drawloom attachment to the countermarch and extension through the holes provided. We don't use these since we prefer to be able to move the attachment around when we're working. Totally up to you. Let's examine the console for a minute so we can ensure everything is aligned properly. Our two uprights are parallel to one another and perpendicular to the floor. The central hole bar is parallel with the floor. Our hook bar slopes gently downwards from left to right, and our top hole bar slopes upwards from left to right, ensuring the geometry of our system will work to its full advantage. Now it's time to rig the attachment with its draw cords and pull handles. The first thing we need to do is hang the guides for our pattern shafts. These will help us to cut our cords to the correct length. Hang the two bars fairly level, about 102 centimeters from the floor. Bottoms of the cords can be secured with arrow pegs to make them easily adjustable. Secure the tops of the cords with two-legged pegs through the holes at the front and back of the attachment. Eventually, our 21 pattern shafts will be ranked along here, attached to the draw cords we are about to rig. From our perspective at the rear of the loom, we are going to rig our cords right to left and front to back. We'll start with our roll of Texsolve laid conveniently on the floor under the near side pattern shaft guide. We'll take up the free end and unspool it upwards. We will pass it through the hole in the draw loom attachment furthest forward. The threading hook provided in the box works well, as does a crochet hook. We'll pull through quite a long length, enough to reach the other side of the loom and then some. We make a loop in the cord and feed it through the first hole in the console's upper crosspiece. Keeping hold of the loop all the while, we draw it down the front of the console. We feed the loop through the first hole in the bar for the pull handles and then loop it around the first two grooves on the hook bar. Pull it snug. Next, we scurry around to the far side of the loom and retrieve the free end of the cord where it's been hanging all the while behind the console. We feed it through the foremost hole in the attachment from top to bottom. We draw the end down to the vicinity of the pattern shaft guide. We return to where we started and snip the cord off our roll of Texsolve somewhere not too far below the top of the guide. Eventually, our first pattern shaft will be hung from this cord at either end. We will be able to raise the shaft by pulling down on the cord at the hook bar. Let's do another one. We draw our free end of cord from the spool through the next hole in the attachment. We make a long length and form a loop. We pass the loop through the next hole in the crosspiece, ensuring we are always working above the previous cord. We draw the loop down the front of the console, through the next hole, and secure it around the next grooves in the hook bar. Pull it snug. We move to the other side of the loom and retrieve our free end. From above, we pass it through the next hole down to the pattern shaft guide. Back at the beginning, we cut off our end to finish the cord. After we've strung 5 cords, we can see how it's going. They are traveling through the holes in order, front to back, and our beautiful arrangement of cords is becoming clear as our rigging takes shape. All the lengths going into the board lie above the lengths coming back out again. This assures that there is no tangling or abrasion when our system is up and running. Even if you don't plan to use all 20 of your pattern pulls straight away, it's a good idea to string them all now, so that the cords are in order and lay correctly in their path down the console. You'll notice there's still one hole left, which we'll deal with in a moment. Now we'll attach the pull handles. The pull handles have a narrow opening at one end and a wide opening at the other. The wide opening is at the bottom. Find your favorite crochet hook for this procedure. Feed the first loop through the handle from top to bottom and make an overhand knot near the end. One knot should be enough, but if the handle ever slips off again, make 2 for safety's sake. Pull it snug and pull the handle down over top. Repeat with all the cords across the console. When you're done, the handles will be all over the place. No fear. Step into the extension and grasp the ends of the draw cords firmly. Pull them down sharply all at once. The handles will snap up to the hole bar where they will lie at rest until needed. Finally, we will rig 2 static cords at the back of the pack on either side. We'll hang our immovable X-shaft from these, secure them with 2-legged pin in the vacant holes, and cut the cords to the same length as the others. Can you believe it? We've built a draw loom. There is another little assembly job though, and now might be a good time to do it. Somewhere in the box you'll find a bag with lots of wee cup hooks which must be screwed into the ends of all the pattern shafts before they can be used. If you're feeling like you need a bit of a break, it's something to do while listening to music and enjoying a nice, refreshing beverage. Let's turn our attention to the project Karen has included in the box, her beautiful, classic flowers in 6-end irregular satin damask. Let's look at the particulars. The warp for this project is 16-2 cotton, which we will wind while holding 3 ends in our hand. The weft is number 16 singles line linen. We will use a 65-10 metric reed and thread 3 ends per dent so that our warp will have a width in the reed of 31 centimeters. Our warp will have 612 ends in total. That's enough information for now. We can wind and beam our warp. If you are new to warping Swedish looms, you will find no better guide than Becky's Dress Your Loom the Vävstuga Way, which we refer to by the nickname Flippy. We followed the Flippy procedure when winding and beaming the warp you see here. We chose this lovely shade of green because we think it will work well with Karen's theme. We're standing at the back beam now, observing the warp ends as they come through the lease sticks. You can clearly see our groups of 3 ends as they pass through the lease. The wisdom and foresight of this arrangement will be evident in due course. Next, we create our pattern units. Let's see what Karen has to say about these. Our pattern units will be arrayed over 11 pattern shafts at the back of the loom, as shown in this diagram. Because our structure is 6-end irregular satin, each pattern unit will consist of 6 warp ends in 6 pattern heddles joined with a lingo. Our 612 ends divided into 6-end units gives us 102 units in total. Armed with this data, we set to work making our pattern units. The first step is to count out 102 lingos, 100, 101, 102. There. Now we need to construct our units. Don't ask me why, but this seems to be a job best done standing up. A good place to do it is at the front of the loom. Place one of the headling bars across the beater cradle and load it up with plenty of black tie pattern heddles. Don't forget to cut the heddles apart if you're using them for the first time. Here you see a completed unit with its lingo and 6 pattern heddles. We're going to count off 6 more heddles and pass another lingo through all the loops at the bottom. Since everything in this project is organized in groups of 6, it's pretty important to count heddles carefully. When we reach the end of our lingo pile, we know we have 102 units ready to go. The units on their headling bar are hung at the back beam for threading. The support is set between the extension's uprights. You can see the notch in the beam here. The bar is suspended from lengths of texsolve. It's turned thusly to keep it from bowing under the weight of the lingos. The heddles are at a comfortable height for threading. To ensure your carefully counted heddles don't end up in a tangled mess on the floor if the worst were to happen, it can be a good idea to double loop the texsolve cords around the headling bar. Now, even though we are going to thread our units as they sit on the headling bar, they will not stay there for long. Let's plan ahead a little and consider their eventual deployment on the pattern shafts. Here's Karen's diagram. The front of the loom is here, and the back of the loom is here. Remember that each black square represents 1 unit, or 6 warp ends. Each row represents a pattern shaft. We can see that the first 10 units here will be on the rearmost shaft, which we call an X shaft and is never lifted. More on that later on. There are additional units on the X shaft here, here, and here. There are 4 units on the foremost shaft. These form the points of our repeated point arrangement. Finally, there are 9 units distributed between these points over the remaining shafts, for a total of 102 units. With a little forward planning, we can make distribution to the pattern shafts quite easy when the time comes. As we thread our heddles, we're going to mark the units destined for the X shaft and the foremost points, X shaft units in red and forward points in blue. This is going to make our lives so easy later on, you won't believe it. Here are the units on the headling bar again, ready for threading. I've already separated out the first 10 on the X shaft. Now it's time to get comfortable inside the extension and start threading. Here is my first unit with its lingo and 6 heddles clearly visible. Here are the first 3 warp ends coming through the lease. I will thread them in order in the first 3 heddles. 1, 2, 3. I try to keep my 3 ends from twisting as I thread them. Soon, I'm on my second group of 3 ends. These will be drawn through the remaining 3 heddles on the lingo. This is why we wound our warp in groups of 3 and counted our heddles so carefully. We can easily track where we are and catch any threading mistakes early because each unit is 1 repeat of 6 ends. You may remember that our first 10 units are destined for the X shaft, the pattern shaft at the back of the pack. When I've finished threading my first 10 units, I tie them off with a red choke tie and get ready to thread the next group. A little later on, and we're ready to check our progress. My first group of X shaft units is here. Then my 9 units to the front point, which are unmarked. Then the unit for the front point in blue, then the units back to the X shaft, and so on. It makes it super easy to keep my place in the counting in case I made a mistake when I was counting out my lingos, and ensures pain-free distribution later on. When I finish threading and tying off units, I'm delighted to discover I have 1 end and 1 heddle left. I mark the last 10 units for the X shaft with a red choke tie and prepare for the next step. Threading the ground shafts. I've hung my 6 ground shafts on shaft holders, which are suspended from the same support as the headling bar. The shafts are secured with safety pins and loaded up with pink tie long eye heddles. Here's the first pattern unit coming off the headling bar. Here are my first 6 long eye heddles, which I will thread straight on the 6 ground shafts. The long heddle eyes are 2.5 inches tall, and so threading will go pretty quickly. Starting on the shaft farthest away from where I sit, I draw the ends through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, repeating all the way across the warp. Each pattern unit is 1 repeat of our straight threading. In no time at all, we thread the final end of our last pattern unit through its long eye heddle. Next, we prepare our 6510 metric reed for slaying. This is hung at a comfortable height from the same beam our headling bar and ground shaft supports are. We'll mark our starting point for a 31 centimeter wide warp and slay 3 ends per dent. This is yet another check of our work, since 2 dents equals 1 repeat of our ground threading. Done. We tie our last warp bundle securely and remove the reed from its hangers. We lay it on the ground shaft supports, ready for its next adventure. For the next step, I've taken the Drawloom attachment off the loom so you can see what's happening, but it can be left on if you're happy to work around it. Now that our threading and slaying are done, our ground harness must be brought to the front of the loom so we can hang its shafts from the countermarch. Here's one good way to do it. Since we want our lee sticks to come along for the ride, I've untied them from the back beam. Then I attach them with long cords to the headling bar. I make sure to do both sides. At this point, we want to make sure our warp knots are good and secure. A lot is going to be depending on them. We let our reed hang like so, and then we do something rather daring. We remove the upper shaft bars from their holders and let them hang also. The safety pins will keep everything in order, even though it does look a bit scary. Be fearless and let all of the upper shaft bars hang over top of the reed. We can now move our ground shaft supports forward. I've looped the cords over the countermarch and hung the supports so the bottoms of the grooves are about 97 centimeters off the floor. More on this in a minute. We release the tension on the warp beam and prepare to move the headling bar, and everything hanging from it, forward. We will return the pattern units and lee sticks to the back beam after the warp has been tied on and tensioned. At the front of the loom, it is now a simple matter to retrieve the upper shaft bars and return them to their waiting supports. A bit of finessing is required to get everything where it needs to be. Once again, we'll spread the shaft bars over the central 6 grooves of our supports to keep them from tipping. We'll leave our safety pins in all the while. I like to give things a good tidy while I'm at it. Next, I take up the reed and mount it in the beater. This can take a bit of finessing too, so the cap makes good contact along the entire top of the reed. It can be a good idea to attach the cords from the countermarch jacks to the upper shaft bars now, especially if the Drawloom attachment is elsewhere, which gives us lots of room to work. If it has been removed, now is a good time to put it back on the loom. Its size makes this an easy one-person job. With our ground shafts and Drawloom attachment in place, we're ready for the next step. Once the reed is centered in the beater, it's time to tie the warp onto the front tie rod using whatever method you prefer. We've tied on using the same knots that are demonstrated in Flippy, although we've finished with half a bow since the 16-2 cotton is a bit slippery. You can see the magic string extending over and under the warp bundles. This brings them level, so we can judge our sheds and start weaving straight away. This leveling also allows us to evaluate better the path of our warp through the long eye heddles. Here's a good way to do it. I've marked a warping stick at the same height as the breast beam is from the floor. Since we are using pink tie long eye heddles, we want the bottom of our upper ground shaft bars to be 15 centimeters higher than our breast beam. I've marked that too. When I check from the side, I can see that my ground shafts are where they need to be for now. Additionally, I can see that my warp is running through the heddles at the bottoms of the long eyes. The height of the ground shafts may need to be adjusted later on. This is a good place to start. Now it's easy to pull my lee sticks and headling bar over the tensioned warp to the back beam. We're ready to tie up our lambs and treadles. Make sure the locking pins are in. Here I am, sitting comfortably inside the extension, ready to contemplate our lower tie-up. It can be a good idea to take care of this now while the pattern shafts and lingos are at the back of the loom and there is still plenty of room to work. Since we are using a countermarch, we must tie up both our upper and lower lambs. The cords included with your kit may be too short to reach the lower lambs from the countermarch jacks, since on the draw loom the countermarch sits on top of the extension. If this is the case, cut longer lengths from the roll of Texsolve provided. We recommend the Vavstuga tie-up system with its black and white beaded cords for lower tie-ups. If you bought your loom from Vavstuga, a conversion kit was provided in the box. Else, kits can be purchased from the Vavstuga store. It's an awesome system, as we shall see, and the locally made beads are as durable as they come. Let's see how it works. Here is the tie-up diagram provided by Karen for 6-end irregular satin damask. We're looking at it upside down. The columns represent our 6 treadles. The rows indicate our 6 ground shafts. Black squares are connections to sinking shafts via the upper lambs. White circles are connections to rising shafts via the lower lambs. On draw looms, we also have blank squares. These indicate where there are no connections at all. We can see that the black beads marking the cords on our upper lambs are the same as the black squares on our diagram. The Vavstuga tie-up system makes this really easy to see. The white beads on the cords to our lower lambs are the same as the white circles on our diagram. Remember, there are only 2 connections per treadle. Treadle 1, for example, operates ground shafts 2 and 4 only. Treadle 2 is connected to shafts 1 and 6. On this loom, it can be a good idea to make your connections towards the rear of the treadles. This helps keep the countermarch from sliding forward off the extension. Now, if this were a single harness loom, we'd be ready to pull out our locking pins and start weaving. But since this is a draw loom, we still have an important task to do. We must deploy our waiting pattern heddles onto the pattern shafts. Here we are, standing at the back of the loom, surveying the warp ends as they come off the back beam and through the lease. Let's remind ourselves how our pattern shafts will need to be configured. At threading time, we marked our units according to Karen's diagram. The units destined for the foremost points have been marked in blue, and our X-shaft units in red. Now, it might be tempting to start moving them now, but bitter experience dictates that double checks are necessary. There are a couple of good methods. The most common is to count ends as they come through the lease. Since we wound our warp in a 3x3 cross, this goes pretty quickly. We can even count in 6s if our mental math is good enough. Another method is to count our lingos. We know, for example, that there are 10 units here destined for the X shaft. If I have 10 lingos in this group, I should be good to go. It doesn't really matter how you do it, but counting and recounting before deploying heddles can save a lot of stress in the future. There are many ways to transfer pattern units onto the pattern shafts. The Myrehed method works great and is described in the instructions that come with the loom. It's also demonstrated in Becky's previous video, Dressing Your Swedish Draw Loom. But Becky has recently developed a new method that we really like, and she's going to demonstrate it now. So we're going to load up the loom, drive it to Vävstuga, and finish our video there. Why don't you take a coffee or tea break, and we'll rejoin you soon from sunny Shelburne, Massachusetts.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Amy, for that nice little introduction to my new method that I've just been experimenting with fairly recently. Using these carabiners, I have these bigger spring clips, So depending on how many heddles you're working with in one group, you might want a bigger or smaller clip. I'm going to start here on the edge. And these are these X-shaft units. So this is the border. We're not going to have to mess with this until the very end. So I'm going to put these green carabiners on these edge groups that have been nicely tied and separated already. So now we can see those, and it's kind of fun to have the green facing out just because. And now we have the blue points. So you remember these blue points, I have blue carabiners. This is just a little group, so these little carabiners work really well for my blue points. Make sure that you've not engaged other heddles, just the ones that you want here. So we're going to put our blue clip, or whatever you want to call it, on there. Here's our next point. And we can put a clip on there to mark that one. And this one here. And then the edges, as you can see from the diagram, is really only a half of a point. So I'm going to mark them differently. I'm putting these silver clips, which I'm actually going to replace with something else in a moment. You'll see once we take these off. But I want them contained for now. And the other silver clip's going to go over here. It's that other half point that you can see in my diagram. And then we have the three big middle chunks in between the blue points. And that's what I'm going to use these big beefy clips for. It's just very nice. You have to squeeze the right side of the clip though, and it works better. And so I'm going to grab all of those. And then between these blue points, I'm going to grab all of these on this clip. And then we have a third one. There's my blue point. And so with all the careful counting that you've seen Amy do, and this kind of careful bundling that I'm doing, now all of our heddles and units are counted and sorted and organized and contained by these clips. And since the warp tension is holding up our lingos, we can actually take this heddling bar out, and let's see how that looks. We're going to do that right now, and we can do it in sort of a gentle, easy fashion. I'm going to take it out on this side too. And where am I going to put these hooks? Oh, you know, I can hang them right here. They will resurface in a minute. But here, as we take these sections off, this is our green carabiner. I can just bring this and lay it over the back. And then here's our silver one. And we can lay it over the back. And here's our little blue one. The little baby blue one. That's just for that first point. That's going to be used on our first pattern shaft. Those blue ones are going to be the points. But then I can take this carabiner and that comes off. And here's our little blue point. And that can come off. And you can see how this keeps everything contained, organized, safe. Any other nice positive word you can think of to describe it? But I'm really enjoying this system. Now this system is going to shine most when you have, especially a lot of small units. If you're weaving a pempta that has very small, delicate little points, 2-thread units, it's great to do it this way. If you have one big point where you're just putting the center unit on a shaft and then the net going out, it's really probably better to do it the Myrehed method and the method that I demonstrate in my first video. And so we're giving you these options so that you can make your choice of how to do this. But let's move ahead with our first pattern shaft, which is magically going to appear Thank you, Amy. We have our blue carabiner. And see how easy this is? I'm just going to lay this right here. And we're done with the marker at this point. And then where's our next one? Here's our next point. And so we can take the carabiner clip off. Here is our third point. And it's better to put it on untwisted. Be that way. And one more point, and then that's our first pattern shaft. So here is our first pattern shaft. I can just hang it here, it'll be safe, and we're going to get our cords ready up front. And so Amy's going to help me on the other side. And these first 5 cords, we're not going to use those because we want to use our middle handles at the front of the loom. It's just more comfortable and convenient. You can choose to use whatever handles you want. But here we're going to start with this first pattern shaft hanging from the 6th cord back from the front. And so now we can bring this pattern shaft forward and hang it up on cord number 6 from the front. I think I'm going to go up 1 hole. You don't want this to be a saggy shaft. You want it to just barely or barely not hit that shaft support. Now, if you look at our diagram up on the screen, we want to start going out from that point and just pick up the next 2 on either side. You might remember I put this little silver carabiner on this group. I'm going to show you another option. If you want to live on the dangerous yet convenient side, I could put on this big S-hook. I'll show you how that works in a minute. I'm going to replace this carabiner. I mean, you can try these various tools out. You'll have your own preference, I'm sure. But a big S-hook can work nicely. I'll show you how that works, because now if I go out just 1 unit, and if I swing this a little bit, you can see where this whole unit is. It's going to be all the heddles. It's kind of hard to pick them out of this rat's nest here, but if you swing it, that means I can just pick that off of the hook. And look, I can put the hook here. It's a little less fussing that way. And I'm just going to slip that on my pattern shaft. And then I have this big group here. And as you can see on the screen, we're going to pull a unit off of each side. So 1 unit off of this side. But in order to really do this easily, I'm going to take this clip off. I can put it right there. And then I'm going to swing this forward, make sure I get the whole unit. And as I take it off my hand, check again that you've got the whole unit. Is it swinging freely? And I can put that on my pattern shaft. And then I need the one from the other side. And if I swing it forward, I can easily see all 6 of these heddles that make up 1 unit and slide it onto my pattern shaft, put my clip back on. So it is true, you don't want to let go of these loops once you have them off of the clips. So be a little careful. So we take the next clip off. We want a unit from each side. Swing that forward. And I could even collect that on my wrist. There's another way to do it. And here's this unit. Check to make sure you've got the whole unit and not any part of another unit. I can put my clip back on right here. And then these 2 go on my pattern shaft. And then here's my 3rd big clip. This is nice because you're just doing 1 little thing at a time and it's all kind of contained and easy to see. So I'm going to swing that out so I get the whole unit, check, peeking below. And then this is the left edge one. And that's another way to do it. You'll figure out how to use all 3 of your hands, I'm sure. And then we have this last one on this hook. And so it's, you don't have to fuss with the clip, but you have to be a little careful to not drop anything. But the hook can be very convenient. It can be more convenient. It's a little more dangerous, but more convenient. So that choice is yours. And we're going to put that unit on, and I'm going to put my hook back. And then we're ready to hang this pattern shaft. Here we go. Next cord. Be careful to take the next one. If you cross these up here, it doesn't work very well, and you'll have to fix it. How do I know that? So you just continue working your way out the point that way, just one unit at a time as you want to arrange them. Of course, there are many arrangements. It doesn't have to be a pointed threading, but that's for another lesson. And so we will meet you at the back side of these pattern shafts and show you putting on the last few and putting on that X shaft, and then we'll continue from there. You can see here that we have now distributed most of our pattern heddles on our pattern shafts. We just have a few left to go, but we saved those to do with you, which we will do right now. But let's take a look at where we're at here. Maybe you remember I had my S hook. I'm showing you a few different ways to do these. The S hook is living dangerously because it can fall off, but it comes off easily. And I'm going to do my swing here, swing it forward. And that really separates which unit is next, and I can simply pull that unit off of my S hook, put the unit right onto my shaft bar. So here's my spring clip for the next group. And I'm just going to take all of the pattern heddles off. And again, swing forward to get the whole unit. And then I can just slip that on to my shaft bar. And then a unit from the other side, just working our way down that point that we started with. And I think it's easiest to put my clip right back there, and then I can put this on the shaft bar. And this allows you to easily see that you have a whole unit, but not extra things that don't belong in the unit. And we take our next group here, and take off my clip, put it aside, make sure you keep your hand in this loop, swing it forward so you get the whole next unit on the right hand side, and then same thing, we want the whole unit from the left hand side, and that's working our way out that point. And at this point, I'm just put that on my wrist, put my clip back before anything bad happens, and put this on the pattern shaft. Next clip. I really do like these clips. It keeps everything kind of organized and contained. You can see what's going on. And there's one. I could collect that on my wrist if I want to, and swing that one out. I could collect that on this wrist. I can reach my clip and put it back. Then I have these two sides of the next point to put on my pattern shaft. Then we have our last S hook here, living on the dangerous side, but it's very convenient. See, to swing that forward, and then we can just take this unit off. And then Amy and I are going to hang this up on its cords. Just above that holder. I have to raise my side. She got hers perfect, but there we go. So here is the moment of truth, our last pattern shaft. And look, we have exactly one unit left on this hook. That's a good sign. I'm going to put that in my pocket, and I might as well go ahead and put this on a pattern shaft. Here comes a pattern shaft, just magical, like it appears out of nowhere. And this one, let's take a look at this, because here we have our nice pink tie, which is our X shaft. But I should have exactly one unit either side of the X shaft. Ooh, look at that. We have our pink tie heddles still here. I'm going to put them back on the clip. So the clip's nice. It has this weight to it. Keeps everything contained. I don't want to lose that one. And so I have my 2 units. I'm going to check. Yep, they swing freely. That's beautiful. And my next clip, I'm going to pull 1 unit off of one side and a unit off of the other side. And what do I have left? Just the tied ones. That looks good. And so we bring these units onto the pattern shaft. 1 more big clip. Left side. There they are. And the right side. There they are. And just the tied ones are left. This is all looking quite promising. I think we get to weave little flowers pretty soon. So, yep, check these units. They're swinging freely. That's good. And one last thing here, our last hook. This should be our last unit on the edge of that point. And put that onto the shaft. We're going to hang this shaft. 1 more cord comes down. That's too high, so I got to go down 1. There, that's pretty good. And then what we have left here is our X shaft that we saved at the very beginning with the green carabiners for the borders on the edge and these separators in the middle. And so we have these 2 units of separation. And you can make these as big as you want. It's a way to separate your motifs without using up extra pattern shafts. So we're going to go ahead and put these on our last pattern shaft here. There's this group. I'm going to go ahead and take this little carabiner off here. It's done its job of keeping those separate. That's what pockets are for. And our next one. Number 3. Maybe I'll put it on that side. And our nice big border at the edge, where it's just a nice spacer. We don't have pattern going on there, but it gives a nice edge to your piece. And we'll put those on. And this gets hung a little bit differently. We're going to use the cord all the way at the back. And we'll go on to a little bit bigger explanation about all of that. So this X shaft is not attached to one of our pull handles at the front. It's in a static position. It always stays down. With your kit, you get 20 pattern shafts, 20 handles, But this is a 21st shaft, so it's an extra. And so in this case, we have handles. We could put it on a handle, but if you never need to raise it, it's a waste of a handle. And so that's what this is for. And there are different ways to use it. And so in this case, it's just used as a spacer between our motifs.
It's now time to consider the height of the back beam. You may recall that when we built the loom's extension, we installed the back beam in the 3rd hole. But the back beam is actually adjustable, and this is the reason why. To test it, I've constructed a guide string. Mine is made out of 12/6 cotton rugwarp, but any kind of strong string will do. I've hung a lingo at either end for weight. It goes over the breast beam, through the reed, but it bypasses all of our heddles and goes straight to the back beam. This gives us a reference line against which to judge our pattern shed. To do that, I'm going to pull a few handles and consider how the reference line travels through the shed. You can see it, I think, if I shake it here. It's not quite what I want. I want this line to travel right through the center of the shed, and it doesn't. You can see that it's too low. Problem might be that I do not have equal tension top and bottom. To fix this, we're going to change the height of the back beam. So I'm going to go back here, and because my reference line is too low, I'm going to raise the back beam 1 hole. So I'm going to take my supports out. Tension's not too tight, actually. I'm going to have to loosen the tension just a little. Just a little. There we go. And I'm going to move it up 1 hole so that it's now in the 2nd hole from the top. Here's 1. And here's the other. Okay, so we're now in the 2nd hole from the top. And I can see that my reference line is now traveling nicely through the center of that shed. And if I pat the threads top and bottom, I can feel that tension is equalized. This is exactly how we want it. So you may have noticed in your shipment rather mysterious items, 12 pieces of buttonhole elastic. Now is when they come into play. Remember that in our damask shed, only 1 shaft is sinking and 1 shaft is rising for each pick. 4 are remaining neutral, and we need some way to keep them in place. This is where these come into play. On our 6 shaft setup, we will have 1 piece of elastic going around each shaft on both sides. So this setup here is mirrored on the other side of the loom. It's pretty simple what we've done. We've taken 3 elastics, looped them over a single loop of Texsolve, which we are stringing over the counter march. The 3 back shafts, their elastic goes over the back support for the counter march. The 3 front ones go over the front support. And this arrangement is identical on the other side. So all I have to do now is feed my shafts through these pieces of elastic. Like so. The trick is to tighten the loops so that the elastic almost, but not quite, lifting the upper shaft bars from neutral. That's all we have to do. So we're all tied on and ready to weave, but there's one more thing we have to do, which is check our sheds to make sure that they're weavable. You can absolutely do this step by yourself, but it's more fun if you've got a friend. You can keep each other calm and work the problem together. So that's what we're going to do. Okay. So Becky, could you lift a few pattern shafts and step on treadle 1? And you can see, I hope, that we have a nice clean shed through which to pass our shuttle. All of the threads from the floor of our shed that are rising are meeting the raised threads in our raised pattern shafts. So Becky, why don't you try treadle 2 now? Destickify that maybe. And there we go. That looks like another pretty good shed to me. I have a nice clean space to pass my shuttle through, a clear floor and a clear ceiling. Let's try treadle 3. Well, we're on a complete roll because this shed looks pretty good too. How about treadle 4? And another, well, we've done this perfectly. I think it's another great shed. Just 2 more to go. Okay, now we do have a problem. If you can see, our shed actually has 3 layers. We've got the floor, the ceiling, and kind of something in between. That's probably because the threads that are being raised are not meeting the ones that are in the pattern shafts that are raised. So we want to lift that shaft more. So that means we have to shorten the connection to our lower lamb. And Becky's going to do that now. It's super easy because of the arrow pegs that we're using. Often just 1 hole in the Texsolve is enough. Let's see if that did the trick. Oh, and it did. Look, nice clean shed. Oh, that was 3 holes apparently, not 1. Never mind. Sometimes you need 3 holes rather than just 1. So that was good. So it's beautiful. 1 more treadle to go. And this one has a different problem, it seems. We do have a middle layer of threads, but that seems to be because our sinking threads are not dropping low enough. That means we have to shorten the connection to the cord going to the upper lamb. Yes. That means we have to shorten the cord going to the upper lamb, which Becky has done. She's changed 3 holes down in the Texsolve, and now it looks perfect. So we really are ready to weave, and that's how much time it takes.
Let's take a look at this nice sheet that Karen gave us with these beautiful flowers that are her designs. And we thought this would be a nice way to start you off. It's so exciting. We're now here finally weaving at the loom. We fine-tuned everything. And look, I've even done a little bit of weaving to get started. And we can see here these are these leaves down at the bottom of this iris. And we thought it would be fun to show you the weaving of this iris. And if you look at this pointed threading that you're familiar with now because we did that in detail at the back of the loom, picture that point right under this iris. And so the stem of the plant is going to line up with that bottom point of the threading. And now we're going to look at my chart that I've made up here on the loom. And see, I just have 1/2 of the iris, and I have the stem on the left-hand side. Here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 columns in my chart, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 handles marked in the middle here with my 2 markers. And that stem, I am going to pull my left-hand handle, which lines up with the left-hand marked square in my chart. And so I've woven 3 cycles. And that means 3 times through the treadles. You'll see that in a minute. But I use this magnet bar row by row. So I've woven that, and then I did another square of the stem and another square of the stem. And you can see those down here. I've woven 3 units high of the stem. And we'll take a closer look at what a unit is quite shortly. And then I've also woven all the way up the flowers. And so to do that, I've moved my magnet bar 1 row at a time. So I'm really all the way up here. I've just finished my last bit of the leaf. And what do we start next? We start on the flower, which I thought would be a fun place. So this, just like the beginning of the stem, says we pull the handle on the far left. So there it is. You can see this shed. I'm going to put my shuttle under here so you can easily see what's been lifted. See, these warp units, one warp unit in the center of each of the point. You can kind of see that pointed threading here, and that's going to be the beginning of our flower. So that means we're ready to start weaving one unit. So if you look down here at my feet, I'm stepping on treadle number 1, and I'm going to go through all 6 treadles. And so there's my second treadle. So one unit of weaving is 6 warp threads wide by 6 weft threads high. So when I go through all 6 treadles, that means I've woven one unit of height. So I have a little square. 6 warp threads by 6 weft threads. That completes this little square here. Now I'm ready to raise my bar. And it says I need to leave this pull where it is, but I get to add one more pull to it. So the next one to the right, I'm going to pull this handle. And you can see, like magic, it pulls everything we need for that next row of the flower. I'm ready to weave 6 picks again. And so here we go, treadle 1, treadle 2, treadle 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can see the beginning of our cute little flower. We're going to raise our bar one more. Ooh, look at that. It's the same thing. So we just leave our pulls right where they are. I'm going to go through these treadles one more time. 1 to 6. There's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Up one more. And we just add one more pull. There we go. And there's something I want to talk about after we weave through these 6. Because do you see how we have only 3 handles pulled down rather than the other way around? 7. What do I mean by that? So look here at our little flowers. You see how they're green? And you might think, well, this is kind of a nice iris color. Maybe we wanted purple flowers. Well, we will have purple flowers on the back side. But it's actually easier to weave it this way up because, look, I'm only pulling 3 handles. The function of the loom will work if I have 3 up and 7 down, which would be weaving this row with the purple showing to the weaver, to me. If you have a choice with your pattern, for example, this pattern, we have many fewer black squares than white squares. The function of the loom works better if you're pulling fewer handles. In this case, that means it's a better choice to weave the pattern upside down. And I have my pattern in black, and this is common, and I'm pulling the black squares, and my purple flower is underneath here. You could weave it either side up, but I find it much easier to do it this way. If you decide to pull all the white squares, you'd be weaving your flowers right side up. I find it confusing to pull the white squares, so if I wanted to reverse it, I might reverse the colors in my chart, but you'll figure all of that out. This is a really simple, straightforward way to get started. I have a sample I want to show you that I wove some time back. This is on an 8-2 cotton warp and 16-2 linen weft. So the same flowers, just 3 repeats, a little chunkier fabric, and this is a nice option as well. Here are the irises in the red, but let's look at the back side. So when I wove this, I had this side facing me. So here you can see on the back side that the weft color is showing as the background and the warp color is showing in the flower. That's what we're seeing as we're weaving our sample on the loom right now. And this is how I recommend that you weave it. But here's a cool thing you could do, which I did not do here, is if you wove with a green weft down here, you could have green stems and leaves, and then you could have a flower color here. So it would look a little funny on the back, sort of stripy, but on this side, you would in fact get your nice green leaves and stems and your colorful flower. So you could have some fun with that. ready to advance the warp a little bit, and there's something I want to show you that you might want to be aware of. So there we go. Forward a bit. Now that we've advanced the warp a little bit, if you look down here at our lingos, do you see how they've come in front of that wooden treadle bar? What we're going to do is just simply push these back a little bit, which is where they want to seat themselves anyway, and then there won't be any interference with that treadle bar.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Becky and I have really enjoyed sharing the Julia Drawloom with you. If you do decide to take the plunge, we have lots of other resources available. There's books and materials at the Vavstuga store, Becky's other awesome videos on Vimeo, and Dueling Rabbit's YouTube channel devoted entirely to drawlooms. When you start weaving on your drawloom, we hope you'll send us pictures of your work. Thank you again for joining us, and happy weaving.